I wasn't supposed to be here. I was just the translator technician, the guy they called in when the primary rig fried itself mid-update because someone thought it was a good idea to plug a Zalari dialect module into a hectoid baseplate. I'd slept maybe 40 minutes in the past 2 days and had one job: stay in the back. Don't speak unless someone's translator explodes. And definitely don't insult anyone's sacred anatomy. The Galactic Peace Mixer was already a sensory. Nightmare flashing lights. Smoke that smelled like burnt licorice and grief, and alien drinks that glowed like mood rings from hell. The ceiling pulsed. The floor throbbed. Somewhere something screamed in B-flat. I stood near the refreshment table clutching a fizzy blue. Liquid that smelled suspiciously like mangoes left in the sun too long. I didn't dare sip it. I didn't dare leave. So I smiled and nodded like a polite, dehydrated hostage. That's when fate, gravity, and a rogue Glitherian server droid all conspired to ruin my evening. Someone bumped me. I stumbled. My foot snagged on the edge of a glowing drink tray. I spun. In slow motion, awkward, flailing, arms wide like a malfunctioning weather vane. Desperately reaching for anything to break my fall, I landed palm first on something soft, warm, and twitching with indignation. A tail. A large, furred, muscular tail that bristled the moment my fingers touched it. Time stopped. Conversations froze. Even the ambient music, some sort of synthesized whale song remix, cut out mid-wail. I followed the tail upward, past gleaming armor etched with claw marks, over sculpted muscle wrapped in ceremonial leather, until my gaze landed on the face of a 7-foot Klar warrior noblewoman who looked like a jungle goddess dipped in menace. Her eyes glowed faintly amber, her nostrils flared, her fangs peeked through parted lips. The room held its breath. "You touched my tail," she said in perfect common. Her voice like velvet scraped over a chainsaw. "I didn't mean to," I croaked. There was momentum, my ankle-weak genetics, slippery floors. Physics, she tilted her head. A low rumble built in her chest, more amusement than rage. Her tail, still under my trembling hand, gave one deliberate flick against my palm. "You brushed," she said, raising her voice. "You bond." "Wait, what?" Gasps erupted across the room. I tried to speak, to clarify, to explain that on Earth, accidentally touching someone's limb didn't automatically trigger lifelong commitment. My translator buzzed, popped, and proudly converted my protest into, "I wish to pleasure your battle son." The elders, at least I assumed they were elders, given the beards and the staff collection, let out a synchronized roar of approval. Krava. As I would learn her name shortly after she hoisted me by the wrist and held my arm aloft like, "I just won a planetary tournament," smiled down at me. Her fangs were still visible, but now they gleamed with satisfaction. "He is mine," she declared. "No, no, no," I stammered, dangling beside her. "This is a huge misunderstanding. I was just falling. I didn't even see your silence." "Brave one," she said, tail wrapping around my calf with the gentleness of a boa that hadn't decided if it was hungry yet. "You do not flee, you do not cower. You touch the sacred tail. You are claimed." The human ambassador in the corner raised his drink in a slow toast, grinning like this was the best entertainment he'd had in months. Traitor. I looked back up at Krava. She stood proud, radiant, terrifying, while warriors thumped their chests and barked affirmations. I just touched a tail by accident. I didn't even know that was a cultural red flag. Now, apparently, I was engaged, or adopted, or marked for ceremonial sacrifice. I wasn't sure which yet, but I was sure of one thing. I really should have worn gloves. I didn't know what I expected after being claimed by a 7-foot beast woman in front of 27 species in a buffet that may or may not have been sentient. Maybe a stern talking to. A slap on the wrist. a ceremony involving paperwork and awkward laughter. What I got instead was dragged literally through the hallways of the Klar embassy by a tail-wrapped leg and a grip like reinforced concrete. Krava didn't ask if I could walk. She didn't seem concerned when my boots squeaked against the polished floors. She simply marched like a war banner made flesh, carrying her newly acquired human accessory, like a prize she'd won in a raffle she didn't remember entering. "We will begin the rites at dawn," she said over her shoulder, as if that clarified anything. "Until then, you will eat, rest, and adapt. Can I also file a diplomatic protest? You may file your mating teeth once the elders confirm your courage. I don't even have mating teeth." She stopped at a tall door carved from black bone and glowing runes and turned with the casual weight of a woman who could lift a car and throw it into orbit. Her eyes scanned me like she was memorizing something. "You smell of alarm, but also defiance. I admire this. It means you will not faint during the trials of proving." "I absolutely will." She nodded, as if that were a bold declaration. Instead of a cry for help, then opened the door with a gesture that made the runes hiss. The room beyond was warm, pulsing with an earthy hum like a forest beast dreaming in its cave. Furs lay strewn over stone floors. Weapons, some familiar, many disturbingly not hung on the walls. A hammock stretched from clawed beams, its threads shimmering faintly with organic tension. "You will stay here," Krava said. "You are now under tail oath." Tail oath sounds legally binding and slightly terrifying. She walked closer. I backed into a chair that looked suspiciously like it had been made from a throne and a very large vertebra. Krava leaned in, sniffed once, and grunted approval. "You are frightened, but you remain. The tail chose wisely. I tripped. Fate trips those who are ready. I didn't have a comeback. I just sat there, trying to process how I'd gone from fixing a cum rig to being claimed by a species that sorted affection through wrestling and smell tests. Krava disappeared behind a curtain. I exhaled, then immediately inhaled sharply as something growled from beneath the floorboards. I froze. A moment later, she returned with 2 mugs of something thick, golden, and faintly smoking. "You drink this. It calms the blood and settles the inner quake." "Does it have caffeine?" "It has the blood of the root beast." "Does the root beast have caffeine?" She handed me the mug. It was warm. So was the air around her. She wasn't just tall, she radiated heat like an angry furnace dressed in armor. I took a sip. It tasted like roasted thunder and moss. My tongue went numb. I'm still not sure if that was good or bad. "You must understand, little chaos," Krava said, settling onto a fur pile with the grace of a falling meteor. "We Klar do not bond easily. The tail is sacred. It is not touched without cause." "I didn't mean to touch it, but you did, in front of witnesses." In a moment of raw instinct, there was a tray of drinks. I lost balance. There was no instinct except panic. Exactly. Pure emotion. No thought. The bond accepted it. This wasn't a conversation. It was a negotiation between species, and I was losing. Krava tilted her head. "You may still run, but if you do, I must chase. If I chase, I must claim again. This is our law. What happens if I walk calmly toward the exit? Then you embrace the bond, and I reward you with a ceremonial nap and soft tail wrapping." I stared. She wasn't joking. Behind her, a screen flickered to life grainy footage of our encounter playing on loop. Multiple angles. Zoomed-in tail contact. Tribal music overlaid like it was the opening credits to a very unfortunate romance. Drama. The Klar broadcast everything. I realized then this wasn't just a personal incident. It was cultural spectacle. I was no longer a technician. I was the human who brushed the tail. Krava stood and extended a hand. "Come, the feast of recognition." begins. There will be meat and blood cake and dancing. That sounds like a very aggressive bar mitzvah. You must sit beside me. They must see you endure. They must believe the bond was chosen, not forced. I took her hand. It was strong, warm, steady. My mind screamed at me to run. But my legs, treacherous fools that they were, followed Dot as we exited the room. I glanced down. Her tail brushed my hip, slowly, deliberately, and I swear it curled with satisfaction. This was happening. This was real, and I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. The Clara called it the proving. I called it the ordeal of please let me go home now. At dawn, which arrived with 2 suns and the smell of roasting meat and ceremonial oil, I was led from Krava's quarters by a procession of warriors, humming in a frequency that vibrated in my bones. They wore war paint that shimmered when they moved, their armor etched with the symbols of battles past, lovers won, or at least excellent gym routines. I was not dressed for this. Someone had given me a tunic made of some kind of soft-scaled leather and matching pants that refused to acknowledge human anatomy. My translator buzzed nervously at my hip, already glitching from exposure to too many Klar dialects spoken at once. Krava walked ahead of me, tall, silent, impossibly sure-footed. Her tail swayed with the rhythm of a ceremonial song, brushing against me every few steps like a reminder. You touched. You belong. You're not getting out of this. I tried to ask questions, clarifying ones, like, what exactly am I proving? Or, will I survive? Or, is the ritual nudity optional? But Krava simply replied, if you ask too many questions, the elders may think you are preparing to flee. Fleeing increases the value of the chase. We arrived at the arena. If you're imagining a circle of stones, maybe a few banners flapping in the wind, don't. Imagine instead a bowl of black earth scorched by centuries of fire, surrounded by rising cliffs carved into tiered seats packed with warriors, nobles, and creatures I'm fairly sure existed solely to intimidate. Some of them had more than 4 eyes, a few had none. Several had already begun chanting in a tongue that made my nose itch. At the center stood a raised platform where Krava now led. Me, a towering Klar elder, face crisscrossed with ceremonial scars, raised a clawed hand for silence. This is the one, he announced. The human who brushed, the human who bonded. There were gasps, cheers, one throatier growl that made me want to dive for cover. Let the rites begin. I didn't know there would be multiple rites. I assumed the proving was a single event, like a talent show, but more dangerous. Turns out it was a series of escalating lunacy designed to test strength, courage, and emotional stability, none of which were on my resume. The first trial was called the Leap of Loyalty. I was told to stand on a narrow stone ledge high above a fog-shrouded pit. In the pit, something screeched. I was to jump, symbolizing trust in the bond and willingness to fall into the unknown with one's mate. Krava jumped first. Landed like a god. I took a breath, tripped on my own boot, somersaulted mid-air, and landed on something warm, feathery, and deeply offended. Apparently, I had collided with a nesting skybird. Revered for its agility and temper. It honked once, rolled over, and expired dramatically. The crowd erupted, not in horror, in awe. He has slain the skybird with his descent, one elder cried. He bonds with gravity itself. I tried to apologize to the bird. The bird didn't respond, probably because it was dead, or meditating, or filing a report. The next trial was worse. The endurance of stillness. This required me to hold a mating stance, a lunge-like squat, positioned facing Krava, while Klar elders took turns trying to distract me. At first, it was loud noises, then flashing lights, then increasingly uncomfortable personal questions like, Do human males prefer ear biting or toe wrapping? Followed by a whispered, your aura smells like undercooked starch. Is that a mating scent? I broke stance, yes. But I did it because I was laughing too hard. The elders mistook that for supreme self-control. He denies flattery. He dances. With mockery. Ancient methods. Krava watched the whole thing from her place across the ring, her arms folded, her expression unreadable, but her tail twitched. And that, I was learning, was Clar for amusement. Then came the final trial. Challenge of bonded display. This, I learned too late, was a sort of courtship performance. A dance. A battle rhythm performed by claimed mates to display harmony, strength, and mutual rhythm. Krava demonstrated her part. Powerful, graceful, like lightning wrapped in muscle. When it was my turn, I panicked and reverted to what my brain knew. Early 2000s. Earth club dancing. Elbows. Knees. Some variation of the shopping cart. I even attempted the worm. Silence followed. Deafening silence. Then the High Elder stood. He clapped once, slowly. He is broken in spirit but unbroken in courage. He displays confusion as art. He is unique. Another elder leaned toward thee, hidden toward thee. Counsel. He moves without shame. This is courtship in its truest, rawest form. I was sweating through my ceremonial tunic. Krava approached, her expression unreadable. I braced for scorn. A challenge. Maybe exile. Instead, she reached out, touched my forehead with her clawed thumb, and said, "You are mine by chaos law." That's not a real law. It is now, the crowd roared. Warriors thumped weapons. Someone let off a blast horn that startled an entire section of spectators into applause. I stood frozen, hands limp at my sides, trying to remember if I'd signed any interspecies marriage documents by accident. Krava leaned in close, voice low and sure. Tomorrow, the tail binding begins. I don't want to know what that means. You will. She stepped back, her tail wrapping around my waist like punctuation. And for one terrifying second, I didn't hate it. I woke to warmth pressed against my back and the low hum of breathing that didn't sound entirely human. It was rhythmic, deep, and layered with the kind of quiet threat you'd expect from a predator in a particularly good mood. Slowly, I opened my eyes. Krava's tail was wrapped around my waist like a living seatbelt, firm and possessive. Her scent-warm metal, rain-drenched leather, and something faintly sweet like spiced bark was everywhere. I dared a glance over my shoulder. She wasn't in the bed. Just her tail, holding me in place like a promise I hadn't signed but was somehow already bound to. "Awake," said a low voice. I flinched. Krava was across the room, fully armored, arms folded like she'd been watching me for a while. I didn't do anything. I blurted. "You did not flee," she said, "or vomit, or attempt seduction while confused. This is excellent. You have endured your first night." Barely. I'm still processing the idea that tail contact equals legally binding cuddle rights. Not. Cuddle. Guarding. Right. She stepped forward and, without asking, tugged the ceremonial fur tighter around my shoulders. "The elders await. Today is the feast of shadow claim." "Why do all your celebrations sound like war crimes?" she grinned. "Because we are a people of fire. Every ritual must be earned." She handed me a set of garments that smelled like roasted pine and wet earth. They were lighter than yesterday's, but still tailored to fit someone with more thigh muscle and less dignity. As I changed, she turned her back politely, though her tail swished with unmistakable smugness. We stepped into a corridor alive with movement. Clar warriors bowed their heads as we passed. Others watched me curiously, whispering behind claws. One bowed low and offered a carved bone charm, whispering something in a tone of reverence. What was that? I asked. He called you the Chaos Binder, Krava replied. It is an honored name. I tripped and danced like an idiot. You defied rhythm. You defied expectation. This is rare. The feast hall was already brimming. Fires crackled along the outer wall, casting flickering shadows over tables heaped with roasted meat, blistered fruit, and something that looked like a melted weapon, but smelled like cinnamon and thunder. Krava led me to the high table. As we sat, her tail slid over my lap with deliberate weight. Several Klar warriors narrowed their eyes. One, a muscular female with a scar that bisected her face, diagonally growled. Lo, Krava growled back. The other warrior backed off. That was a death growl, I whispered. She looked at your throat. It is mine. They must know. That's a sentence I never thought I'd hear before breakfast. The chieftain stood, raised a clawed hand, and declared, We honor the maid who touched, who fell, who danced without shame. Let the questioning begin. That was not a phrase I wanted to hear. They asked me questions, dozens, some simple, some horrifying. What do humans eat before battle? Do earth warriors offer scented oils before mating or after combat? Is hair grooming a punishment or foreplay among your kind? I tried to answer honestly, and where honesty failed, I went with sarcasm. I think they respected that. Or they were just waiting to see if I'd implode under the pressure. At one point, someone wrote down, Earth bonding ritual equals awkward eye contact plus carbohydrate offering plus emotional damage. Krava sat beside me, proud and terrifying. She corrected only one answer when I said humans preferred courtship to be private. She cut in smoothly, but he danced before us all. He showed his desire openly, rare among his kind. I nearly choked on a piece of blood-glazed meat. Later, she led me from the feast, away from the noise into a private chamber draped in silken furs and the scent of hot stone and sharpened steel. A low fire flickered in the pit. She poured two drinks from a carved vessel shaped like a beast's skull. She handed me one. I took it. I didn't dare ask what was inside. You survived the questions, she said. You did not cry, lie, or faint. You are ready for tail binding. I'm still not entirely sure what that is. She turned to face me, suddenly serious. It is the Klar symbol of mutual acceptance. We wrap, we sleep. We breathe as one. Our scents align. Our instincts agree. The tail chooses again deliberately this time. No offense, I said carefully, but human mating rituals usually involve dinner, shared trauma, and one of us texting the other way too late at night. She stepped forward. Her tail uncoiled behind her like a sentient ribbon. Her voice dropped. You are strange, but you stayed. You danced. You did not run, even when you were given every reason to. Her eyes met mine. There was no threat in them, no demand, just a fierce, terrifying sincerity. I do not want you by accident, she said. I want to know if you would choose. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Instead, I reached out and touched the curve of her tail, gently, on purpose. Gasps echoed from the shadows. Of course there were witnesses. Krava's pupils dilated. Her breath caught. Her claws flexed. You touched again, she said, voice husky. Now the bond deepens. I swallowed. This is either going to end in poetry or medical bills. She smiled. Maybe both. They say love is a battlefield. That's a metaphor where I come from. In Klar society, it's a scheduled event with sign-in sheets, sharpened weapons, and a medical tent that smells suspiciously like aloe and panic. The sparring pit was larger than I expected. It lay beneath a sky bruised by twin moons, encircled by jagged stone arches carved with old names and older scars. Fires crackled in elevated braziers. Klar warriors stood in a silent ring around the arena, their expressions unreadable, their armor catching the moonlight like silver ghosts. The air was thick with anticipation and smoke from something called challenge root, which I was warned not to inhale unless I wanted to see time in reverse. I stood in the middle, barefoot, wearing ceremonial cloth that felt more like a napkin than armor. Across from me, Krava entered. Not walked. Entered. Like a living war anthem given form. She wore lighter armor now, meant for movement, not war. Her muscles rippled beneath it, tattoos and scars glowing faintly from beneath the skin like ancient stories trying to rise. Her hair was braided back. Her claws were capped in ceremonial gold. Her tail whipped once, twice, then stilled like it was listening to the wind. A horn sounded. The duel had begun. I didn't move. Neither did she. Why are we doing this again? I asked into the silence, breath shallow. She tilted her head. The bond must be tested. Physical compatibility, shared instincts, strength balanced with submission. It is our final right before tail binding completes. Right. And if I lose, you ride behind me in battle. And in bed. And if I win, you ride beside me. The air shifted. I gulped. And if we both fall at the same time, her eyes gleamed. Then fate chooses, again. We circled each other. I didn't have a weapon. That was intentional, apparently. You are your weapon, Krava had said earlier. I wasn't sure if that was inspirational or a setup for disaster. She lunged. I yelped. Duck. She twisted in midair and landed behind me. Her claws didn't touch me. Her tail, however, brushed the back of my knee with almost flirtatious menace. Too slow, she said. Too terrifying, I countered, spinning around and instinctively shoving. She didn't budge. Instead, she caught my wrist mid-shove, twisted, and we went tumbling, me flailing like a windsock, her growling in amusement. We landed in a heap, limbs tangled, her body hovering over mine, both of us breathless. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Then silence. She stared down at me. Her hair fell over one shoulder. Her breathing was shallow. Her pupils were wide. We fell, I said, voice unsteady. That counts as mutual collapse, right? Very mutual, she murmured. Her voice sounded lower, warmer. Her tail slowly curled around my ankle. Fate chooses, she whispered. And what does fate say? She lowered her forehead to mine. It says we are matched. I expected a cheer. What I got was a collective sigh from the crowd, a strange, heavy exhale of something like reverence. The elders stood. One raised a clawed hand toward the moons. He falls. She rises. They land as one. The bond is complete. Krava didn't move. Neither did I. Somewhere in the pit of my stomach, something shifted. Not dread, not fear, something worse. Something terrifying. Warmth. After a moment, she helped me to my feet. Her grip was gentle now. Her tail remained around my leg. You didn't try to win, I said as we walked from the ring together. I didn't want to. Why not? Because I wanted to fall with you. Oh, we returned to the ceremonial chamber in silence. A space filled with low firelight and hanging tokens of ancient warriors who'd passed the bond rites before us. The scent of spiced oils drifted from a nearby altar. Everything felt quieter now, like the world was holding its breath for whatever came next. Krava unfastened her armor and set it aside carefully. Then she approached and lifted my hand to her chest, where I could feel the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, strong, calm, focused. You do not have to stay, she said quietly. There is still time to leave. No shame in retreat. I stared at her. At the lines of her face, the not-quite smile tugging at one corner of her lips. I thought about the way she always stood between me and the crowd. The way her tail curled around me like instinct. The way she never made me feel small, even when I very clearly was. I touched your tail by mistake, I said slowly, but I fell on purpose. That broke something in her, a wall, a breath. Her tail coiled up around my waist like a promise, and she leaned forward to press her forehead to mine again. No audience this time, no performance. Just breath and contact and a silence full of heat. The bond wasn't ceremonial anymore, it was real. I thought the combat was the climax, the sparring match, the tumble, the tail around my ankle. I thought that was the big moment. The symbolic collapse, the shared breath, the whispered mutual surrender beneath twin moons. But no, that was just the key turning in the first of many locks. Klar rituals were not about single moments. They were layered like a puzzle box sealed with blood, sweat, and very literal growling. The morning after our collapse, Krava was gone. Not missing, just absent. The tail wasn't coiled over me. The fire pit was cold. And for the first time, since arriving in this surreal culture of combat-charged courtship, I was alone. The quiet wasn't comforting. It was wrong. The ceremonial door creaked open without prompt. A young Klar female, probably an initiate, bowed her head. You are summoned to the Hall of Echoes. Is that the one with the war drums or the one with the whispering statues? The one that tests whether your bond is hollow or true. Right, fun. I dressed quickly, my hands still clumsy from bruised ribs and whatever Krava's final tackle had jostled out of place. The initiate led me through winding corridors, past curious glances and hushed murmurs. When we reached the great chamber, it wasn't what I expected. There were no roaring fires or weapon displays. Just smooth stone, echoing silence, and torches burning a cold blue instead of gold. Krava stood near the center, back to me, her silhouette sharp against the sacred stone. Elders encircled her, unmoving. Watching. One turned toward me. Her eyes were clouded but piercing. You have bonded. You have passed the trials. Now the truth. What truth? I asked, voice low. The Klar bond is not symbolic, the elder said. It is not just tradition or tale, it is biological. My throat tightened. What? When one of us accepts a mate through tail binding, the nerve root at the base of the tail engages. It creates a neural echo. Over time, the bond deepens. Emotional, sensory, mental. Eventually, the elder raised her hand and pointed at Krava. Shared consciousness. Krava turned. Her expression wasn't proud. It wasn't smug. It was soft and scared. You're in my head? I whispered. Not fully. Not yet. I feel the ripples of your fear, the edges of your humor. When I sleep, I dream laughter that isn't mine. When you woke without me beside you, I felt your heart spike. And if I leave, the bond fades. It unravels, slowly, painfully, for both. The chamber held its breath. I looked at Krava, at the way her hands trembled just slightly at her sides. She was a warrior, a predator, someone who broke steel with her bare hands and tamed wild beasts with a single roar. But now she was bracing not against attack, but rejection. I didn't ask for this. I said, I know, she answered, quiet. I was just trying not to spill a drink. She gave a low exhale. And I was just trying to survive a ceremony. Without fighting anyone. Fate is cruel, but exact. Silence. Then I asked the real question. The one that had been clawing at the edges of my mind since I landed in this chaotic fairy tale with blood, rites, and battle cuddles. What do you feel? From me right now? She blinked. Once, slowly. Confusion, she said. Fear. But also something else. I waited. Curiosity. Need. Pull. The instinct to flee clashing with the deeper instinct to stay. You feel the bond growing. You just don't have a word for it. And she was right. There was something in my chest, a slow burn, a weight. A tether pulling me not backward, but inward into something ancient, primal, and terrifyingly real. One of the elders approached. You may sever the bond now, if you choose, before it cements, before the psychic fusion finalizes. And if I don't? I asked. Then you are not just claimed. You are mirrored. Your thoughts will leak. Your moods will sink. If one of you dies, the elder didn't finish. She didn't need to. Krava turned to me, eyes searching. Do not demand it. You can walk away. I will bear the shame. The echo will hurt, but it will pass. I stepped closer. Heart pounding. You really want me? A sarcastic, sleep-deprived engineer with anxiety issues and a deeply dysfunctional relationship with protein bars? Her smile broke through. Not smug, not seductive. Just raw and sincere. Yes, because you're honest in the face of ritual. Because you challenge gods with sarcasm. Because when everyone else flinched, you danced. A beat passed. Then I touched her tail again. Softly, intentionally, her breath caught, around us. The blue flames shifted gold. Elders began to chant, and in that instant I felt her like her thoughts brushed against mine. Not words, not clear sentences. Just the sensation of someone being there. Not in front of me, but with me. Inside. You feel it? She whispered. Yeah, I said, like a tether. Krava stepped closer, voice low. There is one more step, but it must be taken in fire and clarity. What does that mean? She leaned in, her breath hot against my neck. We fight. Not to wound. To seal, not to win. To fuse. You want to punch me into telepathy? To wrestle, she corrected. Until we collapse, again. If we collapse together once more, fate confirms the final link. I laughed, breathless. You're unbelievable. You are mine, she said. And I would burn the stars to prove it. The final rite was never announced. It didn't need to be. You felt it dot in the weight of the stairs, in the hush before dawn, in the low vibration of Clar war drums that echoed across the canyon like the heartbeat of something ancient and waiting. There was no trumpet, no declaration. Just the knowledge that this was it, the moment the bond would either be completed or collapse. I stood in the ceremonial ring again, this time not as an outsider, not as a novelty or accidental tail grabber. I stood now as a participant in something older than logic, older than politics, older even than love. Across from me stood Krava. Her armor was gone. In its place, ceremonial bindings of crimson cloth laced in gold thread. Her tattoos glowed in the starlight, symbols of trials past, ancestors honored, instincts obeyed. She looked like a storm carved into flesh. But her eyes? They were soft. I don't want to hurt you, I said, voice steadier than I expected. You won't, she replied. You'll try. You'll push. You'll resist. That is the point. The bond is born not in dominance, but in equilibrium. Balance, I muttered. She nodded once. Chaos finds its rhythm. The elders gathered. The watchers circled. And above us, the twin moons aligned a rare celestial phenomenon they called the convergence. Said to amplify emotional truth? Great. No pressure. A single horn rang out. Then silence. Krava moved first. Not with violence, but with coiled energy approaching. Like a dance, a challenge wrapped in grace. I shifted my weight, mirrored her steps, not quite attacking but refusing to yield. She feinted left. I ducked right. She spun low and fast, sweeping with her leg. I hopped, barely clearing the sweep, and used the momentum to spin toward her. She caught me mid-air, literally hands gripping my waist, lifting me as if I weighed nothing. Told you not to let me win, I grunted. I'm not. You're making me work for it. I twisted, trying to escape, and the two of us tumbled deliberately this time, together. rolling into the dust and ritual soot, tangled in each other's. Limbs, laughter escaping us like truth too big to contain, and then, stillness. We landed flat, chest to chest. My fingers tangled in her hair, her claws resting near my ribs but unthreatening. Her tail looped slowly around my leg, drawing tight. There was a long, breathless moment. Then the world shifted. Not visually. Internally. It was like someone reached into my skull and flicked. Switch I didn't know existed. I felt her. Not metaphorically. Literally, I felt the pulse of her heart and the steadiness of her mind. Calm, fierce, protective. I felt her feeling me. The twist of nervousness I'd buried under jokes. The I kept choking down with logic. The ridiculous rising truth that I wanted this, wanted her, not because I was trapped, but because somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being terrifying and started being mine. Her eyes locked on mine. "It's done," she whispered. It was. All around us, the crowd howled not in chaos, but in reverence. Claw warriors struck the ground with fists and claws. Drums pounded. Voices rose in songs that sounded like war and prayer mixed into one. Krava helped me stand. Her tail didn't release. It didn't have to. I wasn't going anywhere. The High Elder approached with a staff that glowed blue at the tip. He placed it between us, then slowly tapped each of our chests with its end. Bond complete. Chaos and stone. Fire and breath. Two minds, one tether. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. The elder smiled. "Now you eat, you dance, you lead. You endure." Krava's grip tightened ever so slightly. "And you come home." We walked together through the sea of warriors. They parted for us, bowing, hissing phrases I didn't understand but somehow did. My mind flickered with fragments of Klar. Speech. Not translated. Felt. Emotions. Intentions. Echoes of memory I hadn't lived. The bond was growing. Back in our shared quarters. Our quarters now. Krava removed the last of the ceremonial cloth. Not with seduction, but with ritual. Reverence. She offered her tail again, coiling it gently around my torso, then guiding me down to the furs. We sat in silence, her arms around me, my heartbeat sinking to hers. "I will protect you," she sighed. "I know. You are still afraid." "Yeah," I admitted. "But I'm done running." She purred then, a sound like thunder beneath velvet, and pressed her forehead to mine. Later, as we lay beneath the woven canopy, I asked her the question that had haunted me since the Hall of Echoes. If I had walked away, if I had chosen not to bond, would you have let me go? Her silence stretched. Then, yes, but I would have watched the stars every night and waited. Because once the tail is brushed, the soul remembers. I swallowed hard, and in that moment, I knew something terrifying and beautiful. I hadn't just brushed her tail. I'd found my place in the universe.